My apologies for the little bit of a technical difficulty, and welcome to In the Shadows with BaronVvoltage. I can understand kind of a new medium for me here. What we're going to talk about today, I'll get through with that so that this way you folks can kind of understand what we're going to be doing and how we're going to be doing it. First off, let me thank Hellfire Radio for hosting me. Very awesome folks. Thank you for that lovely lead-in, Scoops and Mischief. Remember to check them out. They are always putting a smile on my face. Hi, how you doing, Eric? Good to see you. I am, in many ways, a fan of things that create a visceral reaction. As I'm sure many of the viewers are, of course, fans of the horror genre. But you have to ask yourself, what exactly is horror? What is fear? What is all those wonderful feelings that we get whenever we are enjoying such wonderful media? Be it books, be it movies, be it video games, comics, whatever it is that tickles that lovely part of the brain, the amygdala, creates that fight or flight response. And tonight, I figured it would be good to delve in with a classic, my personal favorite. 1984, Wes Craven, you guessed it. That would be A Nightmare on Elm Street. Now, for those of you, the very few of you, that have never seen such a wonderful masterpiece, it is an interesting tale. It is about a serial killer from Springwood, Illinois. I believe it's Illinois, or Ohio, somewhere in that region, that was known as the Springwood Slasher. Yes, the Springwood Slasher who would target children. Now, he is a vampire. Well, is the Springwood Slasher. Well, it's an interesting point. When Wes Craven was originally creating the character, he originally envisioned what the Jackie Earle Haley Nightmare on Elm Street Springwood Slasher was supposed to be. A child molester and then killer. Due to the satanic panic in the early 80s rather, he decided to not go that route. Because let's face it, it was a bit of a terrifying thing for audiences to really delve into, and felt it might be just a little too relatable. And that is what makes fear what is relatable. See, there's a very keen divide between horror and fear. Some of you may be asking what necessarily is the difference. Well, I'll tell you. Horror is sitting in a movie theater, seeing Godzilla stomp on a bunch of buildings. Yes, buildings. And when the credits roll, guess what? You go out to your cars, and you realize there is not going to be a monster that's going to stomp you out. You go home, you relax. Understandable. But fear is when you see what's on that screen, and then you go out to your car, and you can't help but think, maybe there's something in my backseat. Maybe there's something at home waiting. Maybe tomorrow things are going to be just all kinds of terrifying for you to experience. Because it could be you. I want to thank all the viewers currently. Tyson, how you doing? Tina, hello. Brennan, Good to see you. Lance, how are things out there in Des Moines? Now, with Nightmare on Elm Street, the idea was we have what I would consider to be a blend of fear and horror. A very, very, very subtle blend. And that's what makes it great. Something that might make you say to yourself, perhaps this could be something that would happen. Now, for those just tuning in, this show, Into the Shadows, will delve into media that has existed, does exist, and may exist, to see whether or not we have fear, horror, gore, and what exactly about it makes us feel that way, so that maybe we could actually seek out more of what it is that we want. Good evening to you all. How you doing, Stephanie? Glad to see you. Now, let's talk back to Freddy. The lead antagonist, Freddy Krueger. Somebody who was portrayed, according to lore, as the gardener at a local school. Unsuspecting. I mean, it was a Midwest town. Who would suspect? Kind of draws upon the idea that it could be anyone. Because Frederick Krueger was a family man. He had a wife. He had a daughter, Amanda. Who knew? And his wife covered for him. Again, who knew? The kick, and this is where the fear can kind of kick in. It's where it starts. A fear that something so simple can let something so evil continue. What do I mean? Well, let me explain. The reason that the fear continued, the Stringwood Slasher was not locked up in jail. How is it that somebody like that could run around free and nobody would react? Well, when they arrested him, there was evidence that was discovered at his home. Unfortunately, the evidence that was discovered without proper search warrant, nor probable cause. And when he was arrested, his Miranda rights were not read. Now, I'm sure that we have a couple of legal-minded folks out there who know that due process and procedure with any and all forms of discovery must be followed, or the evidence is thrown out. And that's exactly what happened. When Frederick Krueger was brought up for arraignment, and the prosecution had to present the case was thrown out. Because all the evidence that was found, as well as his arrest, did not follow due procedure. And he was allowed to walk free. Let off on a technicality. Now, naturally, we have to say to ourselves, well, what does a society do? When you've got such a monster out there allowed to walk the streets now, legally, knowing full well what he's done. And you can't do anything about it. Oh, hell no. And by this point, he had racked up a considerable kind of kill count. Considerable. Can you imagine? Somebody in your town, maybe Des Moines, Lance, who knows, walking around that could potentially have in his basement, hanging, implements of pure death, and you'd never even know about it. Unless the newspapers reported, which they did. But Then you find out he's allowed to walk free. Can you imagine? Can any of you? That a killer is allowed to walk? It is. Innocence until proven guilty can be very considered an illusion. And that's exactly what led us to the nature of Nightmare on Elm Street. Because after he was let out, after he went home, suddenly he could tell that people were starting to come for him. So he decided to hide in the one place, the one refuge that he had, the boiler room of a nearby warehouse, where he'd been dumping a number of the bodies. Yes, and that's exactly what came for him, a lynch mob. Only they weren't seeking to hang him. Oh no. How did I know what? That he ran to a sanctuary where he had dumped the bodies? Or that a lynch mob mentality is inspired when a massive amount of society feels that justice is not served? There's a ton of evidence out here today. Many of us within the entertainment industry, the convention circuit, you name it, we're all afraid of saying the wrong thing. We're all afraid of doing the wrong thing. And yes, we will attempt not to do the wrong thing, but what happens if somebody says you did the wrong thing? Ooh. And then the mob comes for you after being cleared. That's what happened to Freddy. Now, granted, he did what he was accused of, and ooh, I'll tell you what, I was a stepfather. As far as I was concerned, I was the child's father. And if I found out that somebody had done exactly what Freddy had done to those kids, to mine, I'd be at the front of the fucking mob. So when they chased him down to the warehouse, yes, I'm a mentalist. Thing is that when they chased him to the warehouse, tracked him to the boiler room, in came the Molotovs and immolated his ass. Word of the day, immolation. Remember that. He was burned to a crisp. Now, supernatural elements get thrown in. Years pass. And as it turns out now, the children that did not get killed during Freddy's initial reign of terror are the ones that are getting taken out. Slowly but surely, one by one. Isn't that a bitch? And nobody knows how. Got kids waking up with slashes across their damn chest. Some don't wake up at all. Who knew? Turns out this son of a bitch is tracking the children of every single parent that held a fucking lighter. And believe you me, they got their payback. They got exactly what was coming to them. Because justice was now served to them. Now, I'm not apologizing for Freddy. As a matter of fact, quite the opposite. He got what he deserved. But the parents' arrogance. But why? Why such a creature? What exactly is it about Freddy that got audiences in the early 80s freaking the fuck out? Well, comes down to a couple of elements, really. Let's start off with the easy one. Why did parents get scared? Well, like I said, a killer could be in their neighborhood, they wouldn't even know it. That's one. Two, what happens if the sins of the father are thus fallen upon the children? Oh, yeah. That's a thing. Let's kick it up a notch. That's the punishment of the parents. What about fear that the system will fail you? That's something we all have experienced these days. That the system will end up failing us and we end up paying for it. Exactly what happened to the parents of Springwood. Every last one of them. Losing their kids. Let's kick it up yet another. Exactly, Tyson. Exactly. But here's what goes beyond that. Fear inspired into these teenagers. What exactly is it about sleep that could be terrifying? The idea of a nightmare. Well, we have no control. We lose any and all ability to have any say what happens in our minds, except for the few of us that have the ability to lucidly dream. And yes and no, Lance. Partially based. Partially. There is a story about some kid who purposely tried to stay up, and they even found a coffee pot inside of his closet. The thing is that nobody can find a legit news article about it. And I've looked. And it was a little thrown off. You know, it could very well have been an article. I wish I had a link to it, because I'd be happy to post it onto the main page. But that's just it. It is something that we feel could happen to us. Because that loss of control, we've all felt it. And yes, they did. I'll get back to the story in a second, but to address Roy there, hi, and thank you for watching. Somebody once asked me, why is Freddy better than Jason? And the answer is very simple. Jason will walk up to you, cock his head to the side, slash you with a machete, and then walk away. Freddy will do it. But Freddy will do it. And he'll do it while singing a song and doing a dance on your corpse. He'll do it with style. And that makes a villain memorable. Because now he's no longer a monster. He's a villain. A memorable one at that. Iconic even. Maybe? So, now he's stalking you in a place that you can't control. But what exactly is it about that loss of control? We've all experienced it. Sleep paralysis. What's holding us down? The demons that are controlling us in our sleep. It's when we wake up, we wonder whether or not the nightmare we just experienced, was it real? Those of us that have really lucid dreams, the really creepy ones, those, you have to ask yourself, was it real? Am I okay? I'm pretty sure a lot of us have come across a time when we woke up from a very horrible nightmare and then immediately called up a loved one or rushed to a family member just to make sure that what you just dreamed wasn't real. You needed that reassurance. Why? It was just a dream. Or was it? Some people even speculate that the life we're leading now is the dream. Mandela effect kind of shit. Who knows? Maybe this is the nightmare. Maybe we all fell asleep and didn't realize it. And this whole thing that's going on now, which the name that I won't say, maybe that's the real nightmare. Who knows? I'll throw you one even better. What if the creatures that exist in the dark are merely waiting for you to fall asleep? Because the images in our mind that the nightmares are conjured from don't come from nowhere. Let's continue onward. There is, without a doubt, the underlying tone of sexuality. And I don't mean sexuality in the sense of gratuitous sex, which, yes, but innocence, loss of innocence. Many times, vampire lore is pushed to be sexual because you have the predator entering the one place that used to be sacred to every woman: her bedchambers, the boudoir, where they slept unguarded. And let's face it, every last one of us, we certainly could not wait to watch the latest big titty bimbo get slashed. Boobs make a good horror flick. Now, here's where it gets more interesting. The loss of that innocence, or that innocence being on the chopping block. That. Thank you, Lance. You see, I couldn't find it. I tried, but ooh. The loss of the innocence, the lack of control, the idea that you might get raped. It's something terrified many people. I don't want to lose my innocence. Well, you may. The moment that your eyes close to that creature of the night that stands out just beyond the window. Or maybe it just exists in your dreams. That which invades the most private place in a person. The mind. And when you're at your most vulnerable, when you sleep, that is where the fear comes in. But where's the horror? Well, I think it comes down to very simply, it's supernatural. A being is legit capable of manipulating reality within the mind. A being that you did not invite. As a vampire, I don't think that. But Freddy did. And he still exists in our minds. I love technology. I love light. But you know what I love more? The idea that a concept of something that could violate from the shadows of the unknown come at us from nowhere and make our worst dreams come true and take great delight in it. You know, Freddy over the years, he got a little more campy. And that's what you gotta ask yourselves. Are these films campy? Yes. Eventually. And I think that was on purpose, if you really think about it. Not necessarily pandering to the audience or just trying to get a chuckle factor out of it. I think it was more to the tune of the more exposed to something that we are, the less terrifying it can be. Because the unknown, that's what scares us. That which we do not know that we can conquer is thus what inspires a fight or flight response. And by this point, audiences, when they saw Freddy up on the screen, they knew what to expect. He can't get us when we sleep. He's something that can be taken out with holy water on his bones. Or, as the protagonist in the first film did, pulled a labyrinth on him by saying, "You have no power over me." and turned her back on him. And thus he was gone. Or at least until Robert Shea had his little tantrum and decided to throw that coda out there. Something to consider. That when we think we've got it beat, nope. Something's going to come along and remind us very soon that we're not exactly the ones in control anymore. That, folks, is what truly inspires the fear in all of us. Fear itself, yes. Relic, good to have you. Fear itself is, without question, the ultimate equalizer. But is Nightmare on Elm Street fear? Is it horror? It's a blend. I think it's a blend where it's fear at its core with horror as its execution. Something that could happen to us, or at least we think can happen to us. But then displayed in a way that it couldn't. At least that we think. What exactly is it in us that makes us root for Freddy? Is it the creative kill? Is it the annoyingness of wanting to shut up the annoying best friend? How many of us have wished somebody in our lives just didn't wake up? Many of us terrify of that to this day. Because we have no control over life or death. Not completely. We can choose when to check out. I'm going to get to The Exorcist. That's going to be one of my future shows, Jeremy. Definitely. But fear, horror, gore, but you want to know what? And this is something I've actually been thinking about discussing. Gore, especially during around that time, was the only way to inspire fear in people. Because back then, the really good masters of horror had found a new shiny. The new shiny were practical effects that people could legit feel in near perfect definition. I think it was Cannibal Corpse that got people thinking, we can make people believe that what they're seeing is real. And they ran with it. Because that was how we could make people believe that what they're going to experience when they leave the theater might match up to what they saw when they were still sitting in that seat. And that started to become the norm. There was no innovation. By the late 80s, innovation in practical effects began to wane. It started to become CG as the 90s went on and the 2000s went on. Some practical effects are still done. And you know what? Beautiful. But then that's when the genre of horror flicks started to really divide between fear film, horror film, gore core, torture porn. I think Eli Roth, I believe, was that the individual for Hostel? Somebody? Yeah. Torture porn. Saw. Now, the first Saw film, I'll talk about that in a future episode, without a doubt. But to put that basely, it relied very heavily on, I guess you could say, perception. With the Nightmare on Elm Street films, it was a perception of experience. We've all slept, and we've all wondered, whether or not what we dreamed was reality and what we experienced was reality. Faces of Death was performance pieces. And those were okay. Some of them you can blatantly tell they were fake. Some weren't, but still. That's what Live Leak is for. But you have to look at it from a stance of what is new out there to really grab people. Is it the latest way to make somebody feel that initial jolt of adrenaline because they just saw somebody's nose get sliced off with a scalpel? Is that what's driving us? Savini is God. Hands down, no doubt, the Sex Machine is the man. But, to continue, to inspire fear now, how would you, the viewer, make Freddy better? I think Wes Craven, the late Wes Craven, did it best in the last Freddy film that he worked on, The New Nightmare. He came up with a way to make the fear that we used to feel relatable again, in a new way. What if what he was putting on screen was to contain something that was real? It was. It so was, Lance. But think about it. He rewrote the mythos of Freddy to show that he was containing an entity in order to be able to stop it from getting loose. Added a supernatural twist to it, a little bit of folklore. I think it's called a tulpa. Something that the more that people believe in it, it actually becomes reality. Only, like I said, a bit of a twist. The only way to contain the creature is to keep it confined within the tales that are told. And that's something to really consider. Because the Freddy that showed up in there, that one, legit, decided to start screwing with people. By screwing with the actors and making every single bit of what we had experienced slowly mold into reality and became Heather Langenkamp's nightmare. And did something that a lot of us were denied in the earlier nightmare films. Seeing an actual child tormented. That, truly terrifying. There are films that can inspire fear. It's just finding that button. Finding that thing. And yes, Relic, you said it best. You just hit the nail on the head as to what I'm saying. We have all already been exposed to the most glorifying types of effects that now we see it and we don't feel a visceral reaction of disgust. What we feel, however, is attraction. Not romantic attraction, but attraction as if to say, yes, that is something that we cannot, without a doubt, turn away from. You know the concept of the train wreck. I'm disgusted, but at the same time, I'm amazed. And I can't turn away. That's what the Freddy films started to become. They started to become a push of, I guess you could say, adrenaline junkies. That's what happened to us. I'd be really curious to see what most of you think on that. Because I myself, I'm curious. I'm perplexed by a lot, but not much. And the nature of the human mind is always going to fascinate me. As a hypnotist, I look to see how to screw with people's heads and push their buttons. Freddy did it best by making it entertaining to all of us. delving into something that we all feel visceral about, a loss of control at a time when we should be at the most in control. Within the safety of our bedrooms, under the covers, warm, ideally with one or two, and slumbering. Yes, exactly, Lance. Freddy inspired a relatable type of horror and fear, because we could all see ourselves going through the same thing. But what else? As I said, go back to visceral reactions. I'm sure some of you that are watching this are parents. The killer in the neighborhood. They say there's, at any given time, like 100 or 200 active serial killers at any given time. What happens if one of them lives in your town? And what if your kid is exactly their type? That is what you have to ask yourself. You're going to be escorting your kid to the bus now? You're going to be wondering who's waiting around the corner. That's exactly what Freddy inspired. That's what made him a true masterpiece. But I'm curious as to what you all think. Perhaps you could tell me what film or media, for that matter, not just film. We could talk games, we could talk books, we could talk comics, that you think possibly inspires fear or horror or torture or just plain exquisite pain. Because, as funny as it sounds, and I'm a very big fan of play on words, you're going to like this. I love me some three sums. Someone, somewhere, and somehow. It's going to get you. I want to thank you all for watching me tonight. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, complaints, cash payments, as I like to say, by all means. You can message me on my personal Facebook account, BaronVvoltage. Look me up, you'll see me. Until then, I want you all to have a very wonderful evening. Look forward to hearing from each and every one of you. I look forward to knowing what you think. Do you like the show's format? Let me know. I'm curious. Who knows? Maybe I got my eye on you when you least expect it. Have a very wonderful night.